As you can tell from the subtitle on the first PowerPoint, my goal is really simple. I want to persuade you that as individuals, you can be a lot more effective than you can possibly imagine. That all powerful and transformational organizations begin with a powerful leader who's be able to encourage others to join him, and soon you have an organization that's capable of transforming a society. We live in a truly prosperous country. We enjoy political freedom, such as the right to vote, and free and fair competitive elections, although we don't necessarily take advantage of that particular right. We enjoy civil liberties, such as the right to practice our religious beliefs. However, many people do not enjoy these same blessings. For example, approximately 1 billion people live in extreme poverty, which the World Bank defines as $1.25 per day. Approximately 1 million children die every year from unclean water. Now, in the United States, we don't truly appreciate that because we have access to clean water. In fact, I bought this bottle of water from Wanda's today. I spent more on this bottle of water than a person living in extreme poverty will spend in the entire day. More in one bottle of water. In fact, if we look at this group right here, about 1 in 7 in this group, if this was representative of the global population, would be living in extreme poverty. We also, with respect to political freedom, about 35% of the global population live in countries that have been categorized as not free by Freedom House. That would include countries like North Korea and Cuba. Another 25% of the global population live in countries that have been characterized as partly free. That would include countries like Turkey. If we apply these percentages to this group, 6 out of every 10 people in this theater would live in a non-democratic country. While these statistics are indeed sobering, I do not want you to leave this event feeling powerless and hopeless. My goal is to empower you to bring hope to people living in desperate conditions. I would like to begin my presentation by showing you a short video of an amazing man who demonstrated remarkable bravery. In the summer of 1989, about 1 million pro-democracy protesters occupied the Tiananmen Square in Beijing, China. The Chinese military entered the Tiananmen Square on June 4th and began to brutally attack the protesters. On June 5th, a protester who was subsequently given the name Tank Man by the media engaged in a protest that was viewed globally. Let me show you that act of bravery.
And then the moment came which has intrigued you and fascinated and moved the world. You stand there, you're looking down, this tank's coming out, it's got its gun up, and this man just went out and he said, "Stop."
It's absolutely extraordinary.
During this time, I'm thinking, this guy is going to be killed any moment now.
You could look at him as unusually brave.
The tank did not try to just run him over. It turned to go around him. And then the young man jumps in front of the tank. And then the tank turns the other way and the young man jumps the other side. They did this a couple of times and then the tank turned off its motor. And then it seemed to me that all the tanks turned off their motors because it was really quiet.
He climbed on top of the tank, banged on the lid, said, "Get out of my city. You're not wanted here." We don't know exactly what he said, but it's clear that's what he wanted to say.
What this young man did was in effect change the world.
He became an inspiration to millions, and he changed lives forever.
I have watched that clip dozens and dozens of times, and it impacts me powerfully every time I do. If my presentation were to end now and with the crushing of the pro-democracy movement in China, then I will have failed because I have left you with hopelessness. But I want to leave you with a sense of hopefulness that you can have an impact. When I end my presentation, I will tell you the rest of the story and how this man's bravery had an impact far beyond China. So I have identified 4 leaders that we're going to focus on very briefly who have very different backgrounds. They come from 4 different countries, one from Bangladesh, one from India, one from Kenya, one from the United States. Very different socioeconomic statuses. 2 you may recognize because they're Nobel Prize winners. A third won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. A fourth, I'm 100% you've never heard of before because he runs an NGO in the slums of India. Very different ages. 2 have subsequently passed away. Like I said, the last individual is in his mid-20s. They have all 4 of them have started life-transforming organizations, and from them I have identified 4 common principles that we can use to be more effective as leaders within organizations in ways that we can't possibly imagine right now, perhaps. So our first individual is Muhammad Yunus, and from him, the principle I want to talk about is engage in the community. He is responsible for the creation of Grameen Bank. And Grameen Bank started with a simple conversation. So Muhammad Yunus is an economist. He was trained in the United States. He was working in an American university when Bangladesh, his home country, gained its independence in 1971. So he did something relatively unusual. He decided to move back to Bangladesh and leave what was probably a pretty cushy job in academia. I speak as an academic. So he moved back because he wanted to make a difference. And one day he did something remarkable, probably didn't seem remarkable to him, is he took a simple conversation, or he took a walk around the village next to the university and had simple conversations. And one woman he met with, she was making these beautiful bamboo chairs, and he was just amazed by the chairs. But she was living in a tore-down house, basically rubble. And he began to talk to her, how can you make these beautiful bamboo chairs and live in such abject poverty? Well, the reality was that she was so poor she couldn't afford to buy the bamboo. So what she had to do was borrow the money from a money lender. And the condition for borrowing the money, besides an exorbitant amount of interest, was that the money lender would determine how much she would sell the chairs back to him, and obviously not at a fair market price. So at the end of the day, she ended up making 2 cents. That was how much she made. And that just shocked Yunus, that could be the case. So he went back the next day, and he walked around the village, and he talked to everybody he could, and he identified 42 different individuals who were borrowing a grand total of $27. $27. And what he decided, what he was going to do is he was going to loan those individuals, those 42 individuals, the $27 so they could escape what he described as slavery. Just think, $27. You can't start a business in the United States for $27. I can't take my family to a restaurant for $27. I have 2 teenage boys. I can't feed them for $27 at a restaurant. All right. But it started with a conversation. You have to get within the community. You have to talk to people. And that's what he did. And so he was, you don't solve problems from an office. You solve a problem by meeting with the people that you want to help and find out about what the problem is and what they can bring to the table. So thus became microcredit. Microcredit is just a very small loan. It could be $20, it could be $25, it could be $30, which in a normal context, well, not normal, but in an American context, like I said, wouldn't matter all that much. Like you go out to dinner, you talk about your business, and then you've used all your business money. All right. But in a developing country, you can take $20, you can buy a cell phone, and now you have a business, because now you rent that cell phone out, and you can make money. What is remarkable about microcredit is two things. First, it's overwhelmingly given to women in developing countries who are typically undervalued, they're marginalized, they don't have credit. I was trying to do something with collateral, I don't know what I was doing with that. All right. Typically, they're twice as likely to be illiterate. If that is not remarkable enough, the repayment rate for microcredit, I have never seen it anything lower than 95%. Can you imagine going to an American banker and say, I would like to loan money to these individuals. They have no collateral, they can't read or write, but they are 95% certain they will pay you back. How many think a banker would go for that? Not in the United States, that's for sure. What he has done, and the end result of microcredit, he's allowed millions of families to escape poverty. So Grameen Bank was only the first. Microcredit is now global. It's hard to find, actually, at this point, an NGO that doesn't offer some form of microcredit. So this is the number of members just for Grameen Bank. The most current numbers on their website is 2009, 8 million plus borrowers. 97% are women. Total assets, or total loans dispersed, almost $1.2 billion. 94% of the assets of the bank are owned by the borrowers. This is not, owned by other big businesses, other big banks. It's owned by the borrowers. There was a study done by 16 development economists from universities like Yale and Stanford, and Cal. Although as a UCLA grad, it pains me to put Cal in the reputable category. And what they found is they looked at different poverty-fighting strategies, and they found that of all the strategies they considered, just in terms of cost effectiveness, microcredit was the 6th most effective strategy. And I'll just close this one section with this. Microcredit is not some complicated economic form. Muhammad Yunus has a PhD in economics, but it didn't take a PhD in economics to figure out microcredit. It took a simple conversation with a woman who found herself in slavery because she didn't have a quarter to buy the bamboo on her own. She had to borrow the money. All right, second principle is building community. So Millett Fuller is the one I want to focus on here, and he is the founder of Habitat for Humanity. So by the way, if I could dispel a myth, Jimmy Carter did not start Habitat for Humanity. I looked to find if there was a poll, and I couldn't, but my guess is you ask most Americans, oh yeah, Jimmy Carter. He just happens to be the more prominent face behind Habitat for Humanity. He actually lives down the road, or lived down the road from the Fullers. All right, Habitat for Humanity is built on the principle of community. In fact, when Millett Fuller and his wife Linda, the origin for Habitat for Humanity, they moved in 1965 to an interracial Christian community in Georgia. So think about that. How intentional do you have to be about community to be an interracial community in Georgia in the 1960s? You are intentional about community. All right, so it was in that conversation that he had with the founder of the community that they came up with this idea of collaborating within a community to build affordable housing. So trust is the foundation for a strong community. A community is not a group of people who share the same zip code. It's much, well, it can be. An effective community is much more than people who share the same zip code. It's people who have trust with each other, which allows for the development of social capital, which allows the community to accomplish things far beyond what they could possibly accomplish, which means now you have a thriving community. How this applies to Habitat. All right, so I was the president of a Habitat affiliate for several years in Marshall, Minnesota, population 12,000, 1.5 Dairy Queens. One of the Dairy Queens did not have inside seating, so obviously during the winter it became less than attractive. No one really wants to eat a blizzard out in the middle of a blizzard. It's just not appetizing. All right, so I'm the president of the affiliate, and we built multiple homes, despite the fact that as the president, I had almost no construction skills. I am dangerous with this. In fact, we had an intensive ITW, part of our ISP training, a couple weeks ago. We were building what turned out to be houses. We didn't know it at the time. And I managed to tag this finger here, my ring finger, while driving a nail. So you can kind of do the kind of the range there. The hammer shouldn't be going all the way over there to hit the nail over here. All right, the reason it worked in Marshall, Minnesota, and the reason Habitat works around the world is that you have strong communities that come together and are willing to volunteer. With almost without exception, churches and civic organizations, if I called them up and said, we're going to build a home, their question was like, when can we come out? They all wanted to do the painting. Apparently that was the most popular of the tasks. Nobody wanted to do the siding when it was like 40 degrees outside. That was less popular. All right. So the goal is just a simple, affordable homes. So Habitat builds homes. The families buy the homes. They're affordable because Habitat doesn't charge interest. It's this wonderful kind of partnership between the Habitat affiliate, the community, and the Habitat families. And they build more than homes. So they have built homes. They've built approximately or rehabbed 1 million homes. Remember, this started in a community in Americus, Georgia. Those homes have helped approximately 5 million people. And this is global. This is just not, it started in the United States, but it's not just the United States. But it's also more than homes. Imagine being a child growing up in a home that is so awful that you don't want to invite your friends to come visit you. It just literally it's more embarrassment than you can stand. Then imagine moving into a home that's not a palace, but it's nice, affordable, and now you can have friends over. You're no longer embarrassed by where you live. You see children who live in Habitat homes, their test scores significantly increase after they move into the Habitat home. All right, Wangari Maathai, another Nobel Peace Prize winner, she's responsible for the Greenbelt movement. There the principle is empower the community. So I have this kind of paradox here. The whole Greenbelt movement is based on a disadvantaged and powerful group, which seems to be kind of an oxymoron. But what Wangari Maathai did is that she recognized that in her country, in Kenya, there was a significant problem with deforestation. And usually women bear the brunt of that problem, meaning that if there is wood to be gathered, it's not the men, it's going to be the women. They're going to walk miles each way, and they're going to be potentially going through some fairly dangerous territory. So he said, why don't I involve the women? Why not give them power to address their own problems? Like, we don't even think about, I don't worry when I go home whether I'm going to have heat to make sure my house is hot enough, or actually I live in Lake Elsinore, cool enough, air conditioning, or if I'm going to have power to cook my food. In a developing country, they have to worry about stuff like that, and typically it falls on the women. I was shopping this morning, I was looking for something like this, and I didn't even know this existed, but it's remarkable. Not only are we so affluent that we can buy wood just at a Walmart, but we now have food-flavored wood. By the way, I'm not bashing barbecues. I love barbecue. I'd never seen wood that was actually had a food flavor to it. Seemed actually probably not a bad idea. All right. So she came up with this innovative strategy of foresters without diplomas. Like I said, women in developing countries like Kenya are going to be twice as likely to be illiterate. They're not going to have a diploma, but you don't need a diploma to plant a tree. And that's what she discovered. So she recruited this army of foresters without diplomas, and about 1 million women are part of this army. They have, at this point, about 4,000 nurseries that are linked to this movement. They each, between all the 4,000 nurseries, every year they're producing about 8,000 indigenous seedlings. And the really remarkable thing is the survival rate, once they plant a tree, is 70%. How many of you have a 70% rate when you're planting? And you're not planting in Kenya. Although if you're planting in some parts of Riverside, that might be equally impressive. All right, so the idea was to empower women. Take a group that had been disadvantaged throughout society, marginalized, allow them to address the issue. They had been ignored, but when you ignore half of your population, you place yourself at a significant risk of not being able to accomplish what you want. So they have planted approximately 53 million trees. They are reversing deforestation, not just in Kenya, but throughout the region. All right, last individual, Avi, and the principle here is include the community. So, like I said, this is an individual you probably don't know. I met him in the slums of India. He has not won a Nobel Peace Prize or a Presidential Medal of Honor, or Medal of Freedom. But he is one of the most remarkable men I have met. He has created an organization called Bigger Than Life. What he is trying to do is meet the needs of children living in the slums in India, kids who are living on $1.25 a day or less. All right. The way that he does this is trying to end the cycle of poverty by bringing in different organizations, different partnerships. He has learned that the only way you succeed in India with an NGO is by collaboration and partnership. You find like-minded organizations. So he's doing a remarkable thing. He's bringing a brighter future for Generation Z. I believe Generation Z is what the next generation is. I don't think have they identified them? All right. Well, I found it on Google, so it has to be true. All right. When my students hear me say that, I'm in a lot of trouble. All right. So for example, we take for granted that our kids have access to books. My kids have a fairly large library. What Avi does is, for example, he brings in groups from the outside who work with his children to teach them to read, and then he finds funding for them to go to schools. But I want to talk about a very special case. So this is me in India. By the way, if you can see, it is so hot in the summer, I have sweat through a pair of Dockers. I didn't even think that was possible. But I got like, all right, so it's hot. All right, you can see the young lady next to me who's got the little girl next to her legs. That girl, 3 years ago, tried to kill herself by lighting herself on fire because her mom had promised her in marriage to a much, much older man. And she just didn't want that life. All right, without Bigger Than Life, she almost certainly would have died. But what Avi was able to do is he was able to find an NGO that would pay the bill for her to have surgery that saved her life, and then subsequently have plastic surgery to begin to repair the damage. And now she's on the road to recovery. So Avi knew that within his Bigger Than Life, he didn't have the resources, but he knew how to find the resources. He knew how to network. All right. So once again, the 4 principles: engage the community, build community, empower the community, and include the community. So what is the rest of the story? Like I said, the Tiananmen Square ultimately looks like it ends in failure. And in the case of China, it currently is. But the impact was actually much, much larger than anyone originally knew. Within months, we began to see pro-democracy movements spring up throughout Eastern and Central Europe. All those countries have been governed by communist regimes with little or no political freedom. And they interviewed some of the leaders, and they directly cited the tank man. This is the part where I get a little bit choked up. They said, if he can stand down a column of Chinese tanks, and you saw, if you remember that video, not only did he get in front of the tank pivoted, and he got in front of then he kept on moving and essentially forced the tank to shut down. If he could stand up to a column of Chinese tanks in the name of freedom, then we can stand up to our governments and demand freedom also. So this is what the map of the Europe looks like now, and if you can see Eastern Europe, green, by the way, is good. Green is free. All in Eastern Central Europe, all was formerly under communist government, all is now free. In addition to political freedom, now they have a free market system, and they're beginning to enjoy prosperity. And it all started, in part, the actions of one man who took the courageous act of standing down a column of Chinese tanks. So my encouragement to you today is to not consider yourself as just one person who can't do anything. Those 4 individuals accomplished more than they possibly could imagine in areas that weren't even necessarily kind of their expertise. But the world was a much better place, or is a much better place, because of what they did. So think of yourselves as much more powerful and impactful because you can be, as long as you take that step of courage. Thank you very much.